You're seeing this, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. How to avoid the climate.
Are you still seeing it or not?
Yes.
Okay. Very good. I remember how to do this.
All right.
Oops.
Should we go ahead and get started?
Yes, sir.
With who's here? Okay. Good morning, and glad you've joined us. And it's the final week of talking about the book. And we started out way in the beginning of the first session, which would have been about 3 weeks ago. I said, what did you think about Bill Gates's contention that you needed to wait until 2000? I mean, you need to set your goal at 2050 rather than 2030. And he brought it up again towards the end of the book, and I thought maybe that's a good place to start, based on what you've read both in the book and outside. What do you think about so now, did he make his case in the book? Because that was one of the very first things in the book, was that statement. We need to set our goals at 2050, not 2030. What do you think? Did he make his case? Do you agree with it? Disagree? What did you think about it?
I thought he made his case. I thought he did a good job of explaining that if our goal was 2030, we might end up with half measures that wouldn't do the job. But he did say that in the next 10 years, we need to be planning and start figuring out what we need to do to accomplish net zero by 2050.
Okay. Anybody else with thoughts on that? Christine? Oh, you're muted.
I just figured out how to unmute. I'm doing this on my phone this morning. I'm at my mom's farm. So, it's a little trickier here. Anyway, so kind of echoing what Deborah just said, he said that 2030, if we set our goal for 2030, it's impossible to meet it.
Mm-hmm.
And so since so why set an impossible goal of meeting that by 2030 if you cannot meet it? It would be, I don't remember him going into this argument, but to me, if you set an unreachable goal, then it's like people realize it's unreachable and they give up, and then it's really unreachable.
Right.
But if you say 2030 is a huge milestone, and by 2030 we should be, at X, then that's, and you set an X that's reachable, then you can get to 2050, your ultimate goal.
True.
So I liked that approach.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think 2030, my goal is to keep working on education, and hopefully 2030 is a realistic goal to begin to have turned a political tide in our country and in parts of the world, without which nothing will happen. Nothing ultimately meaningful will happen. But so that would be my goal, is to be as involved politically as I can. If we could get that tide changed, then things are really possible.
Christine?
So he mentioned writing to your legislators, which I've done many times to Grassley and Ernst. But I always get in reply a canned response, and I wonder if they see my address, Iowa City, Iowa, and they know Iowa City, so they just put me down in the crackpot pile of, well, there's another Iowa City liberal. So I was thinking this morning as I woke up, how could we as a congregation do a letter writing campaign that wouldn't just end up in the Iowa City crackpot pile? Could we encourage, do we have friends and family in Western Iowa who we could encourage to write to our legislators and say, hey, this is important. I'm from Council Bluffs. I'm from Sioux City. Then they might pay attention. And maybe I'm too cynical. I don't know. You guys tell me.
I don't think you're cynical. Barb, you had your hand up too.
Well, I can't change my mind, but anyway, I was just going to say that I've noticed, so much how this is in the news, and you talked about the politics getting in the way. Just this morning, they're saying that the program to rapidly replace the coal and gas-fired power plants is likely to be cut from the Democrats' plan because of Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia and his ties to the coal industry. So, hard to fight things like that.
Right. One of the topics, I guess, is as we move on, from this, you've kind of launched into, my next thing was going to be, what topics from those last three chapters then do you want to go to? I wanted to make sure we got to the 2030 versus 2050 thing. At the very end, I want to make sure we get to, if anybody found stuff they wanted to share that they came across in the news, I wanted to make sure that was available. So the letter writing piece, I think Christine May, that's a good idea, to have people write from different parts of the state. As soon as you said that, I thought of a couple of people that I think would be willing to write from heavily, Republican areas where people, where they tend to not support vaccines or other things. And maybe we can get some traction that way. One of the things that I got thinking about was it seemed at my former church we had done some letter writing campaign. I think it was more for Bread for the World or something. I don't remember the topic. And we found that we didn't want to all write a canned letter because people don't write canned letters. And maybe an adult ed session might be a letter writing session where we all, I don't know, sit down or bring the letters in and we make sure we mail them to the right places or something. Anyway.
That's actually an MO of Bread for the World. They do that, and they typically will give you the address, and then they'll say, here are some basic points, but put them in your words, right? And so they are of the conviction that those things, handwritten, not exactly just one more copy of the exact same thing, could be helpful.
And then we all need to drive out of Johnson County to mail them, I guess.
Well,
I'll mail them to my friends in Sioux Center.
There you go. There you go. And maybe write the letter. Yeah, but just. So, what? Anything else in those last three chapters? The getting to zero, the why policies matter. That you want to bring up. That you saw was a great.
Chris Schlattfeld has a hand up. Chris Schlattfeld has a hand up.
Okay, Christine.
I'm Roy, I'm thrilled about your suggestion. I always have my ears tuned for future adult forum topics. And I believe that we will have a letter writing campaign coming up here because that's a great idea. And if we can get people we know, the campaign might be to write to our friends and family in Western Iowa and get them to be on board with writing to Ernst and Grassley, because like I said, I think that they see return addresses. I mean, when I write a letter, I indicate what my address is if I'm writing to one of my senators. And so, I can drive out to Western Iowa and mail it from there, but they're still going to see that I live in Iowa City.
Sure, that's right. Yeah.
So I'm going to look at that as a future forum topic. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. So I wonder if you'd want to, when that time comes, I wonder if you'd want to present it with Pastor Sarah to possibly have the LCM students join us on that.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Great idea. You guys are what makes my job easy on adult ed. All these ideas just come in. Thank you.
One other thought.
Yeah, Dick?
One other thought on the, the return address, because I'm sensitive to just what Chris was saying. But as one of your newer Lutherans here, I know there are a lot of Lutherans in Northwest or Western Iowa. And yeah, so as a campaign with the Lutheran, on the return address, they may pay more attention than, climate advisory committee from Iowa City they'll put into the trash bin. But I don't know if that would make a difference, but see if we could get their attention.
Well, I like that idea. I like that idea of the letter writing campaign, including writing a letter to people in other areas that we think might be on board. I think that's a brilliant one, Christine.
Yep. I'm going to toss out another topic here, and just on page 189 in the book, if you've got the book, if you haven't had the book in front of you, he had a section on the chapter of why government policies matter. And he said, work on technology, policy, and markets at the same time. And I thought that made some real sense to me. And I thought he did a good job breaking that down. Anybody else grab hold of that or think it was a good idea? Christine?
I think that getting government involved is the only path to success. We as individuals cannot make this happen. It has to be at the federal level. It has to have a federal component. I mean, even if California has been working for years to affect positive steps toward climate, addressing some of the climate issues. And other states are sort of getting dragged along in a way, but it's not enough. It's got to be at the federal level.
Yes. Pastor Roger?
Yes. The other thing, and not just the federal, it's the business level. You'd like to think that there would be some honest Republicans. I mean, good old Republicans, right? Not this Trump crap, who would understand what Bill Gates said early on. Somebody in the end of here is going to make money.
That's right.
At the end of the day, it's not going to be the moneymaker in 50 years to have all your money in coal futures. You are the person who invests, and of course, there's going to be money lost on the way. But the person the company that actually starts doing something here is going to is going to do well. And I see a little hope in that area right now, in the area of how many companies are coming up with electric cars, because they've determined there's a market here. People want this, and enough companies start investing, and before you know it, we're going to have an electric car whose green premium not that high. I'm quite convinced of that. I've always joked my midlife crisis car. I'm past the midlife crisis. It's in. I can't even see it from here. But it was going to be a Jeep convertible. I thought that'd be fun. When I was in North Dakota, I can have this convertible and make a case for it. My next car that I buy is going to be electric. But I think it's going to be affordable. It's getting closer, and part of that is because we are showing companies there's a demand, so they are investing and doing it. Somebody's going to be the Elon Musk of some of this other technology, and they'll do well. And that's the case I think that I want to make to my Republicans, who are just great Republicans, who are themselves a bit disillusioned with all this. Whatever has become of the Republican Party.
Yes, thank you. And Christine had mentioned the state level, and California was doing some things. I think Bill Gates mentioned 26 states out of the 50 have made some plans to work towards the climate agenda from the Paris Climate Accord. And I know the state of New York, only because our son is involved with policy there, has been very active in in making some positive strides towards green, the green movement and efficient, trying to avoid climate issues. And when he was home at Christmas and he sat downstairs, working in between days, or I think it was at Christmas time. Anyway, or no, it was the spring. It was after the COVID piece. And so he was, we finally got to see him in April. He flew out and he was with us for a couple of weeks and worked from home and worked from our place. And one day, he had been on this long conversation on the phone for about, I think it was an hour and a half. I heard him talk, we heard him talking and asked him about it later. And it was the director of trying to avoid climate control in the state of Michigan. And so I know there are states out there trying to work towards making a difference. One of the things Gates talks about in the book is state governments, local governments, and individuals. There's a place for everybody. I mean, we have to do some things locally even, and we can make a difference. And the state piece. And so I think there are some states out there. And who knows? Maybe there's something happening in Iowa that we don't know, that I don't know about. I'd be surprised, but maybe I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know, that there are some things. And we'll get to a couple of things that at least are happening in our area at the end with some stuff that but any other comments? Pastor Roger?
Yeah, I mean, so during the Hawkeye games, they're brought to you by Farm Bureau, and actually their commercials are pretty green. They're talking about farmers working to create clean energy. Well, I think that's a lot of not Democrats, and the Farm Bureau represents a lot of people, so it's not like everybody says this is just nonsense. So I found that encouraging. Of course, I needed something encouraging yesterday, so it was the commercial rather than the game.
Yeah, no kidding.
One other thing.
Raise a hand.
Sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand.
That's all right. We'll still take it.
But to be optimistic about in Iowa is we don't want to take our wind power generation for granted. I picked up a couple people from Denver at the airport, and we have kind of a little windmill, wind turbine sculpture there, and they were all aware that Iowa was a leader in that. And I think we're approaching 50% of electricity in that renewable form, and jobs. As back to what Roger said, Kirkwood College has all sorts of people in their training to maintain all of those, because that generates good paying jobs. And so we can be optimistic about that. For somehow, I can't even trace it, but how Iowa became such a leader per capita in wind generation.
True. Maybe that's a good transition point. I mean, we don't have to wait till the end to talk about things that, in the beginning, I also suggested you look for stuff that comes up in the newspaper or mailings or whatever. And maybe that's a good transition, because we are starting to talk about things that are happening. And Pastor Roger, I had given you 4 slides. And I guess I'll share out some things that I've seen, and maybe some of you will want to comment on some of that stuff. And, here's the thing that we all probably get in the mail, ours having to come from the Democratic Party, is a priority survey. And, I always knew climate was important, but I think I would get this survey sometimes, and that maybe wasn't my top priority that I would indicate when I'd send those back. And this book has made me rethink that this does need to be a high priority. And so if we get these surveys, I guess I'd like to suggest that, we think about how we prioritize the climate, and the economy is important and all that stuff. But ultimately, we need to, save the planet. I guess the book has done such a good job with making me aware. But so that's one thing. I had a couple of things here. Pastor Roger, if you could share another one. Or if not, does somebody else have something they wanted to talk about regarding things that they've seen in the news other than, well, Vic just mentioned the wind power piece. Oh, here's one. Okay, here's another one. I don't know. Maybe you guys read all this stuff, but I a lot of times don't. But the MFS view on climate change. Barb has an investment with MFS company, and I've got a couple others, and I've started to know. And one of the things they brought up in a newsletter, since I read this book, that they are looking at, and they've got all kinds of stuff on. They're taking it seriously, and they're looking at when they're, it says climate change will be a defining investment topic for the decades ahead, creating risks and opportunities for business. As long-term investors, MFS is carefully analyzing the impact that climate change has on all companies held in our clients' portfolios. And they're doing a lot of research themselves and trying to make sure they do some positive things with, investment in climate change. So anybody else see any of that kind of stuff come through on investments, or do you read that stuff? I usually don't. So that's that's why.
Well, my investments are through the ELCA,
Okay.
where 40 years ago, when I first started, you have the choice of investing in my retirement investments are either in their general fund of whatever it's stocks, bonds, whatever mix, or you had the choice of a social purpose fund. That's nice. I think I've seen an occasional other company do that. It was interesting to watch how that unfolded, because first of all, the ELCA at their assembly, they said you have to get out of anything that supports South Africa. That's where this got started.
Okay.
And then the people who manage the fund, I learned about the prudent person rule, that you can't tell the people who manage Roger's money that they're going to do something that's going to cost less, that's going to make me less money. That's against the law. They can't do that. But they could give me the opportunity to say, I'm in. You do the best you can with things that do have a social purpose screening, and I'm in. As it turns out, those two funds have performed almost identically for 4 decades.
Interesting. So I think there are things that people are seeing, and anyway, I sent 4 things. Do you have another one there? Yep. Oh, here's an interesting one, and I hope you can see these things, but where we live, we're part of the Lynn County REC, Rural Electric Cooperative. And once again, we get a monthly newsletter that sometimes I don't pay attention to, but this one was the most recent one. And, again, I think the Gates book has caused me to look at that. Rebates are removed, central air. But look what its available option is. Central high bed all source heat pump and a hybrid heat pump water heater instead of a regular water heater. Electric dryer, hybrid heat pump dryer. And so I was, last week we talked, heat pumps, when we did our furnaces and stuff 2 years ago in our condo when we moved in, we were getting gas stuff, and I'm thinking, oh, good. And, but look what's available. And even some of these things are coming out. Has anyone else seen some things like this where they're finding more rebates available on these kind of products? Christine?
I wish that I had seen these about 3 years ago when I had to get a new air conditioner, furnace, and water heater.
Yep.
I would have jumped on, a heat pump water heater. I don't know if they were even available back then, 3 years ago.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing that option 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. We moved into the condo, and so I think it's encouraging. I guess what I'm saying is, though, maybe this stuff is starting to show up, and maybe that's the case for Bill Gates. Is we need to be working towards 2050, because Christine and Barb and I are probably not going to replace our furnaces that are 2 years old. You know, we just simply can't afford to do all that. But, you know, as we make our plans forward, we can be looking for those kinds of options. And I think I had one more, which I found interesting. And again, this is all since the Bill Gates book. Level 2 electric car charger, rebate available up to $500. So if you're like Pastor Roger and you're thinking, gee, I want my next car to be electric, you know, they've also made some rebates available for these kinds of things. And so what I don't know, and maybe somebody here knows, so when these rebates are made available, like through the local REC, you know, a rural electric cooperative in our case, maybe it's a different power company in Iowa City for some of you, but are those state driven? Are they federal driven? Anybody know? There must be some. I would think there's some kind of government partnership with rebates like this.
I don't know. If it's a rebate, it's hard to say. I got solar panels when I was in North Liberty, and tax deductions on that made it incredibly attractive. Of course, I installed those in December and then sold my house in May, but hadn't planned to move. But in that case, the tax incentives, unfortunately, those tax incentives are grading out. They're removing them piece by piece. So,
okay, Christine.
I don't know, but I wonder if the rebate is through the REC, then that probably is not being pushed by state level policy. But if it's a tax incentive, then obviously that one is.
it's also encouraging. This is the REC. This is not in, by and large, Iowa City.
You got it. That's exactly right.
So that's kind of that's encouraging, just like the Farm Bureau commercials are encouraging.
Right. So, and I guess I had 2 points here. One, that things are happening, and number two, I typically haven't paid attention to the stuff that's happening until I read the book, and I'm starting to read newsletters that come from companies that we work with. Like, you know what? Maybe those are places that you can make those cases to do things. Anybody else have things that they've seen? That was it for me.
But I'm gonna start reading newsletters.
All right. All right. You know, the other thing I had down in my notes was a sermon that you did, Pastor Roger, a couple months ago, that dealt with climate change, and you did such a great job. And I think sometimes anyway, whenever that fits into the the texts or whatever. Anyway, that was a great one. And anybody else have other books they've read or things that they've seen that connects to climate change? Deborah?
This isn't a book I've read, but I'm just aware of an opportunity if anybody's interested. There's a local group called 100 Grannies for a Livable Planet, and they're having a series of 5 on Tuesday evenings. And they're really interested in that Project Drawdown. There's a website and a book, I think, and they really take a kind of a global look at what's going on with climate change and what needs to be done. And so if anybody's interested in that, I can pass along I don't have it with me right now, but I can pass the link along.
Okay. That might be a good thing to have. The last chapter in the book started out what each of us can do. And the very first sentence I really liked. He said, as on page 218, he said, "It's easy to feel powerless in the face of a problem as big as climate change, but you're not powerless. And you don't have to be a politician or philanthropist to make a difference. you do have influence as a citizen, a consumer, an employee, and an employer. And of course, he talked about the writing letters, attending town halls, getting involved in that thing. Page 220, he said, in the United States, for example, electricity is primarily regulated by statewide public utility commissions made up of either elected or appointed commissioners, and know who your representatives are for that. And so that's what got me thinking about the rebates and wondering if they were state driven or if there's a public utility. I don't even know if there is a public. There's got to be probably one in Iowa, but somehow finding out information as to who that is or what that is, that might be interesting.
Roy, I wanted to encourage people. There's if you're a Facebook person, or you can do some other way, but there's a Facebook. Here's the Facebook place to a place called Iowa Interfaith Power and Light.
Yes.
You get on their mailing list. You follow them, or just you can do it in regular mail. But Iowa Interfaith Power and Light. I've been on their mailing list, and they're reaching out statewide to help those of us work together.
Okay. Are we a member of that group here at Gloria Dei?
We are.
Okay. All right. So that's good.
But you individually can follow it.
Okay.
Okay.
Iowa Interfaith Power and Light.
You search for Iowa Interfaith Power and Light. You tell them, you follow them. At some point, they'll ask you if you want to be on their mailing list, and you say what you want to say. But it's good stuff. They had a call to climate action thing with a what's it called? A petition I signed on to, and it's something. Something's better than nothing. All right.
Absolutely. And maybe they have connections to this utility.
Roy, I'm going to sign off.
Okay.
You guys are surely welcome to keep going. I got to just find myself here.
Sure. For services. You bet. Okay. Thank Christine. Thank you for your contributions on that.
You're surely welcome. I'm going to sign off. I think it will have me make somebody else the leader.
Okay.
So Roy, I'm going to assign you to be the leader when I leave. I think it's going to ask me that. Okay.
Okay. Sounds fine.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Christine,
and I would just add another group to follow is Citizens Climate Lobby, CCL, and they are a national organization, and they have been lobbying for a number of years, lobbying our legislators to get them to pass some legislation at the federal level that would help with carbon. Now I can't even think of the term that.
Yeah. Carbon removal. Yeah.
Well, but carbon. So.
Carbon capture.
Yeah, carbon capture plus also this idea of carbon credits or something.
Okay.
So that getting businesses that are polluting to pay pay for cleanup, and then the fines and fees that businesses pay would come back as a rebate to individual citizens, and that would help ease, and in particular to farmers, and that would help ease the transition for people to switch from gas to electric, and for farmers to switch some of their practices. So it's that idea of carbon credits and who pays and who gets to reap the benefits, and how we all move together forward towards carbon neutral and carbon zero.
Right. That's good. I think anybody who has a link.
Climate lobby.
Okay. If you have links, I know Deborah mentioned hers too, and Christine. It might be nice to, I don't know if Annie can put that kind of stuff in a weekly newsletter to say, here are some connections or whatever. But one other thing, Christine, you said something that reminded me of this. One thing in fact, Barb and I had this conversation this morning when she was telling me about the modifications to the infrastructure and climate bill or whatever. And And, one of the things, Senator Munchin or whatever is from West Virginia, one of his big concerns is he's got a bunch of folks in the state that work in the coal industry, work in the gas, natural gas. And so one of the things Gates talked about was we need to find a way to make sure we assist employees in those states that are going to lose, if they lose jobs because of coal or natural gas or whatever the green climate industries are, we need to make sure we find ways to support them and help them get jobs to replace, because that is a real loss. And I'm sure the West Virginia electorate would not be thrilled if Senator Munchin approved all this other stuff and then didn't really have a backup plan. And so I thought Gates's comment on that was really helpful. And Christine, your comments there made me think of that. So any other last comments on this book or Dick?
One more thought on those jobs. What I've heard is in the last 6 years, through the entire Trump administration, more green jobs were added than exist in the whole coal industry, the coal mining industry. And so it's not even political. It's like economics. The companies are investing in this. And in Iowa, we've added, several thousand jobs, all related to the wind and some of these changes. So it's encouraging, and it doesn't even have to be necessarily so political, but just economics.
Yep, great point. And in fact, I think Pastor Roger started the whole thing that was his comment, was how do we make people realize this is economically sound as well? Christine, you have your hand up too.
My last thought, and I'll try not to be a pessimistic cynic on this one, but when I read his afterword, he was writing that in November of 2020. The landscape has changed dramatically since then, and I would love if he would publish online or wherever, publish a new afterword that could buoy us up. I need, because his afterword that we read in this book.
I may have lost you.
Oh, his afterword that I read in this book doesn't take into account all of the things that have happened since the election. And I would like to see him write a new afterword that would take those things into account and let us know if he's still optimistic. Because I've lost some optimism, and I need a cheerleader. I need a positive.
Yeah, we all do. Yep, we all do. No kidding. Well, I tell you what, I'm usually involved with setup with the parking lot worship here at 10:30, so I'm going to kind of wrap things up. But one of the things he talked about in this book was, talking about this book with friends, or getting other people to read this to become, kind of more informed. And I guess I'd encourage you, if you thought the book was helpful, find a few people to read this thing and give it some thought. And thanks for participating. We weren't always large in number, but it was great. So appreciate everybody doing it. All right. See y'all later.